Yes, there's a big difference on those two issues. And I think, first of all, to understand that there is totally different about all the debate about human rights and all the aspect of self-determination issues. So in the Golan Heights, as I said, let's be focused on some facts. Golan Heights is 0.6 from the Syrian territory before 67. I'm not talking about half of Syria or a third of Syria. Is 0.6. We know that the Turks, with their interest, captured much more land from Syria, and during the history also in those times the Turks are in Syria in much vast areas. Second, the population of the Golan Heights today is around 50,000 people, around 25,000 Syrian or previous Syrian Druze. This is the most lucky Druze in the Middle East, because if those 25,000 were located 5 kilometers north or east, there was no 25,000 people there. So they are the lucky Druze in the area, and those Druze has the rights for Israeli citizenship under equal rights to as other Israeli citizens. So there is no issue of, as I said, national conflict on that area. If we compare to the Palestinian territories, the Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, depends how you call that, we are talking about a challenge, so almost 2 million people there. So you cannot compare it. And it can tell you as an Israeli that the Golan becomes an internal part of the Israeli way of living, of Israeli culture. There is a huge history there. There is an amazing, there were during all the years Jewish existence, Jewish settlements in those areas. There's amazing synagogues there, that ancient synagogue, archaeological site. So this is part of the, let's say, the territory that the Jewish culture developed, and so as I said, there is no future to the Golan Heights, but only the Israeli.
I was in Israel in 2005 before the Gaza withdrawal, at which point, you know, there were many Israelis. It was a very divided, internally divisive issue. You know, there were Israeli rabbis that argued, let's save the synagogues, they'll be turned into mosques. There were Israeli benefactors who bought the greenhouses. You know, then as soon as the last, you know, Israeli soldier withdrew, and the blue and white flag of the Israeli government were lowered, you know, the synagogues and those greenhouses were destroyed in this chaos of anarchy, hate-infested anarchy. And there was a brief power-sharing agreement between the PA and Hamas. Eventually, Hamas took over, and now we see what's going on. And many Israelis thought at the time that this was a very magnanimous gesture, that we will give the people living in Gaza an opportunity to prove their own sovereignty and stability. That's within Israel. Could you just imagine if there was a land bridge stretching from Tehran through the Golan Heights? Iran would, and I had to also say in comparison, the Islamic Republic of Iran is the granddaddy of all the terrorism that we see coming out of Hamas. And they're the main funder of all sorts of terrorist groups, whether they be Sunni or Shiite. Could you just imagine, if you will, if the Islamic Republic of Iran had a foothold on the Golan Heights? You know, the terror coming out of there. I mean, it's so you can make a comparison. And that was supposed to have been, you know, a magnanimous offer. People were saying, even in the absence of a peace partner, let's give them an opportunity to demonstrate how responsible they could be and how, and this is what we have right now, the situation in Gaza.
From my reading of American interests, I think there's a great difference between the West Bank and the Golan because of the demographic issues and because of what that means for U.S. relations with the rest of the Arab world. I agree with the statement that the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Jordanians are not going to be particularly disturbed by a change in U.S. policy on the Golan. There'll be some ritual declarations against it, and then everybody will forget about it because unlike American policymakers, they're realists and they know that it's in the hands of the Israelis to stay anyway. One issue that strikes me, though, is that there's a tendency in American policy to regard the 4 June 1967 lines as sacrosanct, as having some kind of status in international law and in our policy, which they simply don't have and shouldn't have. And I think that's true for the Golan, and I think that's true for the West Bank, the West Bank as well. And you can see that clearly because people who are arguing for a two-state solution and for concessions by the Israelis in the two-state solution are calling for land swaps, in which, in return, Gush Etzion, Ariel, Ma'ale Adumim, the Israelis will give up land in in 1948 Israel. Right. So clearly, the 4 June lines are not sacrosanct. So let's get rid of that idea completely.
Unfortunately, we said that, you know, historically, the two Muslim states that were in a real peace, in a very strong relationship with Israel were Iran till '79 and Turkey till Erdogan leadership. And this is also an historical lesson to Israel about risk management in the region. Because if we saw those two non-Arab countries, yes, Muslim but not Arab countries, where the Israel lead them, we have to put a question mark about our willing to take risk in the region. And if you're talking specifically about the Turks, the Turkey under Erdogan leadership play a very problematic role inside Israel, inside the West Bank, inside Jerusalem, and also in Syria. They support the extreme Sunnis group. So they are not, as I said, help the stability of the region. The main issue, the main interest in Syria is the issue of the Kurds. Mm-hmm. And if we are talking about the understanding that to create stability in the Middle East, the borders and the arrangement have to be relevant to the situation on the ground. We see the Kurds as the ruling third part of Syria, what we call Syria. That means there is no real Syria country, we see that the democracy or human rights aspect develop in those areas. And those who most afraid from the develop in the Kurds area in Syria are the Turks. So, as I said, when we're talking about new policy in the area, in the Middle East, we have to take under consideration also the Kurds issue. And bottom line, you know, sooner or later, they have also to recognize their interest, their rights, the rights for kind of, I don't know, under federation, confederation, or even self-determination in those areas of the future.
Yeah, just the Hauser-Duran alliance is about to break apart on the Kurdish question. But maybe we can find a basis for agreement, because Erdogan is ideologically hostile to Israel. There's no doubt about that, and
and to the United States.
Well, I don't know. I represent those 7 people in Washington who are concerned about trying to find a new arrangement with Erdogan, and because I believe that we have aligned ourselves with the PKK. It was a tactical decision that we made without thinking about its strategic ramifications. And that's the main beef that he has with us. So the potential here, though, is that a change in policy on the Golan is a very clear statement by the United States that from its point of view, the 1923 boundaries of Syria are also not set in stone and can be redrawn to meet the security needs of all of the peoples of the region, including the Kurds, but including the Turks. That's something that's a prospect that Erdogan, I think, will think long and hard about before he engages in any kind of serious opposition to this policy.
I just want to say that in answer to your question, Erdogan has been meddling in Syria. He also sees the chaos and the instability as fertile ground for him to flex his muscles. He's gone into Afrin, which was an independent Kurdish region, which and the Kurds did, you know, fight alongside American troops, you know, very costly, shed their own blood, and unfortunately, he has engaged in a population transfer of the Kurdish autonomous region in Afrin, bringing in Sunni Muslims. So, you know, he is also trying to flex his muscles in the region, that we can agree.
For sure. I seriously doubt that we would ever get Putin to agree that that a unilateral American declaration of recognition of Israeli sovereignty of the Golan Heights is a good thing, because it diminishes his role. He wants to be he wants to be the great power supporter of whatever entity on the other side is going to negotiate with the Israelis, and the new policy would say there's not going to be any negotiation. So I doubt that. I mean, the recognition of the Golan is really just the recognition of the 74 line. For me, with regard to American policy, there's a bigger question here about Russia's role, and that is, if I read the tea leaves correctly, and I don't have any really good information about what happened in the summit, but there's an inclination on the part of the United States to think that it can split the Russians and the Iranians. Israeli policy is kind of based on that as well. To put it crudely, Israeli policy, I mean, to put it in simplistic terms, the Israelis have been sending a message to Putin that they can topple Assad, and if he wants to, and that they will do that if Iran continues to cross their red lines in Syria. And if he wants to keep Assad in power, then he better put pressure on the Iranians not to cross Israel's red lines. It looks to me like the Trump administration is buying into that concept a little bit. The problem with it is that Russia, in my view, Russia cannot control Iran. And in the end, in the final analysis, the Iranians have a strong interest in demonstrating to the world that Russia cannot control it. They don't want people making a beeline to Moscow saying, make the Iranians do X, make the Iranians do Y, make the Iranians do Z. They want people coming to Tehran and talking to them about the future of Syria. So in the short term, it might be in their interests not to cross Israel's red line and to get along with the Russians on that question. But sooner or later, if Syrian government troops take control of Syria up to the line on the Golan, the Iranians are going to follow. And that's one of the major reasons why I think we're all saying that the United States should recognize Israeli sovereignty.
Yes, first of all, about the question about the 50,000 Druze that were in the Syrian Golan. Again, these 50,000 Druze that you say in Europe is a part of several millions. If you are talking about refugees that were in the region that will back to the Syrian Golan Heights, that there were as a part of new arrangement in Syria, we have to see the big picture. First of all, Israel has nothing against the Druze in Syria. We believe, and I'm talking about personally myself, that in the long run we have to think about coalition of minorities in the Middle East. You see, this is not only the Druze, we saw other minorities that share the same challenges in this region. And Israel is a strong country that, can keep their security by itself, but we not forget that we are a minority, a small minority in the Mediterranean. And that's why I believe that we see the intolerance of the part of the major part of Mediterranean to minorities. And that's why we believe that in the long run, I believe that in the long term, we share the same, somehow the same interest. When you're talking about, 6 states or something, first of all, historically, Syria, and during the 20s, during the French mandate, was divided to several countries that reflect the ethnic variety or on the ground. The idea to take all those people together under one regime could happen only under a system of dictatorship. And we felt that all this arrangement that we can walk, because it's walked under dictatorship for almost 90 years, the Sykes-Picot agreement from post First World War till the civil war in Syria, that's something that supported by a very cruel dictatorship powers. What will be in the future? I don't think that there is a future for Syria without intervention of other countries, aka Iran, or maybe support of Russia. If this situation can lead to stability, I don't believe it. So, but I don't believe that the existence of the Iranian in the Syria that support Assad as a puppet regime will bring a stability for the long term. So I believe that we will see in the next generation, and especially after what's happened in this region, that hundreds of thousands of people killed, family killed each other. You know, this I see it as an effect like an atomic bomb effect on the region. So that's why Israeli risk management formula has to take under consideration the long term of unstabilized situation. And that's what we lead to us to understand that after 50 years of Israeli existence in the Golan, we cannot see a different situation in this area than another 100 years of instability situation, and that is mean Israel must stay in the Golan Heights. We don't know about what will be the technology, what will be in the future, but for sure this is not something that you can, you know, make kind of peace talks and people will gather again, refugees will come back, and Syria will be flourish. This is
Well, you should write your Congress. No, I mean, our policy on this is totally one of inertia. It's time to really ask ourselves, it's a very simple question. Can we imagine any situation in which we want Iranians looking down at Tiberias? And the answer is no, it's not going to happen.
Okay, in answer to your question, which was very good, we on EMET can actually partner with some other wonderful organizations. I see Judy Friedman-Kalish from AFSI, another excellent organization, and put up a petition that all of you and all of our partner organizations could sign, talking about American recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. You know, we can work with members of Congress, you know, at least get a letter to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And I know, you know, there are lots and lots of ideas that I have, but, you know, I think the first part is education. Socrates said, if you know the good, you will follow it. And this is good policy. And